Rabbits have a mixed reputation in Britain. Some see them as cuddly, inoffensive creatures from their childhood, like Peter Rabbit or Little Grey Rabbit. Others, having read Richard Adams's book, Watership Down, might think of them as resourceful and determined. To farmers, they're a destructive pest, costing their industry £30 million a year in lost crops. Before rabbits became a pest, they were an asset to the farmer, who could catch them and sell them as meat and skins. Later, because of the damage they did, farmers began to persecute them. In 1954, when a virulent plague nearly wiped out the rabbit population, most farmers were delighted. A lot of townspeople were very upset to think of their favorite wild animals dying a disgusting death in the open fields. Millions of rabbits died, but the population recovered from its apparent death sentence. Every year, at harvest time, the sentence is reviewed. This is Wimpole Warren, a huge rabbit city over 100 years old in sloping parkland that has never been ploughed, an ideal place for rabbits. It's the dawn of a new year. In the early morning, the rabbits are making their way home. A fieldfare is looking for its first meal of the day, but the rabbits are replete. They have been feeding all night. Their mainly nocturnal habits help them to avoid their many predators. At night, while they're feeding, rabbits tend to pick up twigs and dirt in their thick coats. Before they return to their burrows to sleep, they clean themselves meticulously for comfort and hygiene. The most important rabbit here is this male. He's easily recognizable by the black marks above his eyes, scars which show that he's recovered from myxomatosis. Black Scar, as we'll call him, is the dominant buck in the warren. He's very aggressive in defending the territory round his burrow. Intruders know where the boundary of his territory is because he marks it with a scent gland under his chin. The trials of strength at this time of the year serve to establish Black Scar's dominance over all the other male rabbits. He seems to be feeding quietly, but he moves ever closer towards a rival until he's near enough to attack, then sends him packing. Because he has the best feeding ground in the warren, Black Scar is bigger and stronger than the other bucks, and a threat is usually enough. When he comes into conflict with his closest rival, the second-ranking male, the fighting can become very violent. While buck rabbits are aggressive on the surface, their life underground is a different story. In a crowded burrow, there's no room for fighting. Someone could get hurt. Below ground, rabbits remain on friendly terms. There's a strong bond between a buck and his senior doe. She takes the initiative in choosing a burrow, and he then protects the surrounding feeding grounds for her. Rabbit society is subtly dominated by the does. Each extended family is a matriarchy, ruled by the senior females. Scent is important, especially underground. The familiar twitching nose of an alert rabbit exposes the most sensitive parts of its nostrils. Back on the surface, Black Scar, too, is sniffing what the wind brings him. He knows all the rabbits in the warren individually by their smell. At present, he's looking for his principal mate. When a doe is about to come into breeding condition, she sometimes actually moves towards her mate. It's one of the few times she seems to notice his existence. Otherwise, she merely tolerates him as the defender of her burrow. From December to June, the doe will become receptive every 7 days until she is fertilized. This time, the courtship doesn't lead to mating, and she moves off. To keep other suitors away, Scar uses a maneuver known as enuration. He approaches a subordinate buck and sprays urine on his coat, which has the effect of driving him immediately underground. Some buck rabbits live as solitary nomads for part of the year. They've probably been forced out of an overcrowded warren. Since males don't dig burrows, they have to live on the surface, anywhere they can find good grass, until the breeding season begins. In January, they often travel for miles in search of a mate. This one is trying his luck in Black Scar's warren. Against the rightful owners, he stands little chance. Perhaps, if he's lucky, he might be able to shelter in a burrow somewhere near the edge until he can win a mate and the long-term use of her burrow. At the center of the warren, Black Scar is courting his doe once more. He adopts a more delicate approach, and she allows herself to be pursued. Feeding like this, in daylight, is usually a ritual. The serious feeding's done at night. This time his advances are better received. 3 weeks later, Scar's doe will give birth underground. The warren is a safe place for her young, just because there are so many rabbits around, all on the alert for danger. Hares have no such security. They live solitary lives in the open fields, bringing up their young in shallow nests on the ground, called forms. Hares are among our oldest inhabitants. They've been here for 100,000 years, long before the rabbits arrived. In fact, we know when rabbits came to Britain to within a few years. They were brought in by the Normans soon after the Battle of Hastings. Kilpeck Church in Herefordshire is one of the finest Norman churches in Britain. At its east end, the masons embellished it with cartoon-like characters, showing that by the 12th century the rabbit was well known here. For 600 years there was no such thing as a truly wild rabbit. They were kept in warrens, under the watchful eye of a warrener, who sold their meat for the pot and their fur to a furrier. The warrener culled a certain number each year and left the rest to carry on the stock. One of the ways of catching rabbits was ferreting, a method that continues unchanged to this day. The first job is to cover all the holes and emergency exits with nets, carefully pegged down. Rabbiting these days is not mainly for food. The rabbits which the Normans cultivated so carefully escaped, and in the open they bred like rabbits. Now the damage they do to crops and timber costs about £30 million a year. Ferreting is one way of controlling their numbers. When the nets are in place, a ferret is taken from its carrying box and introduced into a burrow. It doesn't always perform perfectly. Some ferreters like to work with 2 ferrets at the same time. Well-established warrens are a maze of twisting passages with as many as 10 different bolt holes. Escape is easy, both for the rabbit and the ferret. This is a polecat ferret, or fidget, a breed whose scent rabbits find particularly frightening. The thundering of feet inside the burrow indicates that they've caught wind of it. As the rabbits come out, the rabbiter is there to kill them as quickly and painlessly as possible. The light-colored coat and pink eyes of the other animal show that it's an albino, a true ferret. Its scent, too, means danger to the rabbits. When the scent gets too strong, they bolt for the open air and into the catcher's nets. For some rabbits in the warren, there's no cause for concern. Walled up in a side alley off one of the main burrows, these youngsters are isolated from predators and also from their father, Black Scar. That's just as important because he'd eat them if he found them. They can clean themselves from an early age. The young rabbits, or kittens as they're called, are now 3 weeks old. The doe has made one short visit each day to feed them, digging her way in and then walling them up again as she leaves. When they grow up, they'll have to dig their own way to freedom. One cool April day, the next generation of rabbits takes its first look at a new world of light and color. This is one of many litters that will emerge during the breeding season. Each year a doe may produce up to 6 litters of as many as 6 babies each, 36 hungry mouths for the unfortunate farmer to feed. For the first few days the family sticks together, but the young soon have to learn to fend for themselves. Their mother mated 2 days after they were born, and she will soon be preoccupied with her next family. Among Black Scar's offspring, one is marked out for higher things. We'll call him Blaze, after the characteristic white blaze on his forehead. At present, he's just one of the new season's young, but we shall see him again. As Blaze and his brothers mature, and the warren becomes more crowded, life will become harder. Soon they'll lose the privileges of youth. The older bucks will start to bully them when they see them as rivals. For the moment, all is peace. Rabbits eat up to 1 pound of grass a day. Unlike cows, they don't chew the cud to get the best from it. They digest the food twice by eating their own pellets. If they didn't, they would have to eat twice as much grass. It's a habit they share with their relatives, the hares. By June, the warren is teeming with rabbits. Many of the youngsters are living on the surface for lack of burrow space. A rabbit without a burrow is a sitting target for predators. Man and his ferrets aren't the only animals that spell danger in the warren. Rabbits are born with one great disadvantage. They're delicious to eat, and they're the favorite food of every carnivore that's big enough to catch them. A rabbit is the biggest animal a buzzard can kill, and one that's well worth the effort. During the breeding season, buzzards depend on rabbits as food for their young. While the buzzard is the rabbit's principal enemy from the air, their most famous predator hunts them on foot. In the summer months, foxes don't depend on rabbits for their survival. They also enjoy fruit, beetles, game birds, and voles. But it takes more of these to get the same amount of protein as they can obtain from one rabbit. This fox isn't hunting. He's probably fed already this morning and is off to doze through the day. The rabbits seem to sense this, and some of them don't bother to bolt for cover as he lopes past them. There's one predator that can follow them underground. It's the stoat, an animal that might have been designed specifically to catch rabbits. Stoats get most of their food from the warren. In 1954, many stoats starved to death when at least 95% of the rabbits in Britain died. They had been killed by a virulent plague introduced from France. Myxomatosis is a horrible disease. In its final stages, the rabbit becomes paralyzed and blind. At first, people didn't know how the disease was transmitted, though they knew that it occurred mainly in the breeding season. Later, they linked it to the rabbit flea, which can breed only after feeding on the blood of a pregnant doe. An infected flea transmits the virus as it bites. During the spring of 1954, almost every rabbit that was born picked up the fleas, contracted the disease, and died. The British landscape changed as a result. The grass grew longer and the hedges spread into the fields, but the corn sprang up as never before. The British taste for rabbit pie changed too. This race of crippled creatures was no longer seen as fit for food. But the rabbits held on, and although the disease still occurs, their population is now back to what it was before the plague struck. Many of them have become immune to myxomatosis. Others, like these, can recover from it, scarred for life, but healthy. Probably the greatest rabbit killer today is neither disease nor stoats. It's a long, hard winter. The first rabbits came from Morocco and Spain. For their descendants in Britain, bitter weather is a fearful ordeal. Winter hits hardest on the edge of the warren, where the weaker rabbits don't have burrows to shelter in. They merely dig themselves a shallow scrape and trust that the cold weather won't last too long. Those at the center of the warren are better off. They can hole up underground for several days at a time. But burrow or no burrow, if the grass is covered for too long, all the rabbits will starve. Only about half of them, the biggest and hardiest, will survive through a hard winter. Those that were best nourished, with the more dominant positions in society, will be able to command whatever sparse feeding is available. In a really hard winter, the survivors are often those with the strongest stomachs. A rabbit which depended on grass would starve. When they can't find all the grass they need, they often have to turn to other foods, one of which is the bark of trees. In the springtime, the evidence of the rabbit's hardship remains, in the form of stripped branches with pathetic tooth marks. A few strips of bark can be the difference between starvation and mere hunger. These fallen branches are not a favorite rabbit food, but they show how hard the winter has been. Rabbits really prefer to nip young saplings in the bud. Together with bark stripping, this kills hundreds of trees in a snowy winter. The Forestry Commission and rabbits have always had a strained relationship. This tree, blown down by a storm, probably fed a good number of hungry rabbits. Rabbits cost the farmer a lot of money too. For him, they've always been pests. Myxomatosis lightened the burden, but not for long. In 1953, rabbit damage cost farmers £50 million. By 1955, the first year after myxomatosis, it was almost nil. Now it's approaching 30 million again. In spring, the damage doesn't look too bad. Just a few blades of wheat gone from the edge of a field. When harvest time comes round, the result is more obvious. The rabbits' nightly raids from the hedgerow have taken a toll of the crop. Scenes like these demand that rabbits should be controlled. For the survivors at Black Scar's warren, the winter is over, and the farmers' problems are starting to multiply again. Even some of the hardiest individuals have died, and that has meant a change in the cast of characters. When Black Scar died, the leadership of Wimpole Warren fell vacant, but not for long. Scar's son, Blaze, now rules the roost. Even after his first autumn molt, he still has his characteristic white mark. He found it easy to take control because he already inhabited the central borough. But he still has to enforce his rule with endless patrols to subdue the other males. So the cycle of the generations goes on, as it has here for over 100 years. Winter kills, but spring renews the population, and soon the warren is as crowded as ever. Even in the best years, it's never overcrowded. Rabbits have a form of birth control which prevents that. When the warren is full or food is in short supply, a pregnant doe can reabsorb the embryos within her, saving her energy to give birth at a more suitable time. Richard Adams's book, Watership Down, suggested that the buck is the head of the family, but in reality, the senior doe is in command. She allows herself to be mated only when it suits her, and, having decided where to live, she makes the burrow for her offspring and hides them from the male. His role is only to defend the territory. Plenty of human societies live in this way. It has enabled rabbits to take over Britain, perhaps too completely. We have to decide what to do about it. Rabbits in the wild make the British countryside a more enjoyable place. Even though they're underground for most of our waking hours, when we can see them, they seem charming and eminently lovable. A farmer, trying to grow a good crop of wheat, might not find them so endearing. But even to farmers, rabbits are good to eat. That's why they're in Britain at all. Even though wild rabbits are still somewhat out of favor because of myxomatosis, rabbit meat is gradually being accepted again for human consumption. The answer to the rabbit question might involve a return to the purpose for which the Normans introduced them. Regularly cropped and humanely killed, rabbits could provide a source of good quality meat while their numbers were kept in check. The countryside needs rabbits, and not just for their charm. They hold back the spread of hedgerows and trim the grass on the downs, for example, preserving the beauty of the scene of which they're such a favorite part. Though they may not be as harmless as they look, there is a lot to be said in their favor.
There is no animal in the British Isles that is more wild or eccentric than the brown hare. It is quite simply a law unto itself. The hare is a paradoxical creature, if ever there was one. It can be bold, reckless, and utterly oblivious to danger, or timid and highly secretive. Its natural history is mysterious. Even people who've spent all their lives in hare country seldom agree about exactly how it lives. There's one thing, though, that we all know about hares. They're mad. The creature with that impenetrable glassy stare has become the classic storybook madcap, like the Mad March Hare in Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. For the Mad March Hare, it was always tea time, along with the Mad Hatter, another wild eccentric. The hare's reputation for lunacy and crazy exploits is worldwide. This is the guard from an ancient Japanese sword. A golden hare, almost certainly intoxicated, is poling himself across a river in a wine cup. Where he's come from or where he's going, we don't know. The hare probably hasn't much of a clue either. In Britain, it's in spring that wild hares traditionally go mad. They career around the countryside in a state of complete abandon and box each other about. They can be highly aggressive and make the fur fly. In the frenzied outbreaks of fighting, hares get absolutely hopping mad. But why do hares get so mad? No other mammal in Britain behaves like this. It's worth taking a closer look at the hare and its wild, unpredictable life. The brown hare feeds on crops and pasture. It lives over most of England, Scotland and Wales, often sharing its habitat with the lapwing. Both favour flat, open farmland, though hares do sometimes occur in deciduous woodland. The farm is an ideal place for a hare to live. Every field the farmer ploughs means a new source of food when the crops come up later on. With different crops sown throughout the year, the farms provide the hare with a welcome variety of diet. Farmers don't generally begrudge the hare some of the fruits of their hard work. They like to see the hare about. But today, they're seeing far fewer hares. In the 1960s and 70s, the hare population fell sharply to about a quarter of its earlier level. So many changes in agricultural practice were happening at the time that scientists were at first unable to pin the blame on any one cause in particular. Was it chemicals, new crop varieties, or just a series of cold, wet springs? The hare is a member of the lagomorph family, which also includes the rabbit. It's easy to confuse the two at a distance, especially if they're sitting still. The rabbit, like this one, is quite a bit smaller than the hare, but the best way to tell them apart is by the ear length. A hare's much longer ears give it a very distinctive appearance. The hare's large ears and its tail are marked with black. The hind legs are much longer and more powerful than a rabbit's. Hares don't have burrows for protection. They live out in the open, relying on their legs to outpace their predators. To keep it warm in the open, the hare has a thick coat, which is white on the belly and reddish-brown above, flecked with tawny gold, white and black, to camouflage it. The hare does have some features in common with the rabbit, like its sensitive nose and its split, or hare lip. The brown hare has two close relations in Britain. The smaller mountain or blue hare lives on high moorlands in Scotland and parts of northern England. It has a white coat in winter to camouflage it when it snows. The Irish hare is similar to the brown hare, but has a more orange, almost fox red coat. It behaves as recklessly as the brown hare. All three types of hare declined in number at the same time, but the brown hare was the subject of most research. It is by nature solitary and unsociable, but in the mad season, in spring, it shows an intense, if sporadic, interest in its fellows. The jacks, the male hares, roam from their home grounds to compete for the females, or gills. The two sexes are almost impossible to distinguish, except for the behavior. In fact, there's an ancient Welsh country belief that the hare changes sex every month. The jacks put on a wild display, poking and punching kangaroo style. The females are more reticent. Here, a jack approaches one, lying in her form. Another jack bursts in on the scene, but the first one fights him off. The female is not yet willing to mate, but jack hares are persistent suitors. In the mad season, they pursue any gill regardless of whether or not she's receptive. A Jill hare will try to keep head and shoulders above any jack who won't leave her alone. From this position, she can box down any mating attempt. In a really serious argument, both parties will bite each other and end up with mouthfuls of fur. Just occasionally, they'll call a truce and give the impression of being a contented couple. But Mad March hares are highly temperamental, and the fur may fly again at any moment. Again, the Jill just manages to keep on top of things. Fighting can lead to injury. This one's lost the tip of its right ear. Many get bloody noses too, and lie up for a while, with that mad brown eye keeping watch for trouble. In some parts of the country, hares are called dew hoppers. When the dew is on the ground is when they like to feed. Hares don't usually move around during the day, but in the mad season they break all their own rules, courting in earnest by day and by night. Contrary to popular belief, it's not just in March that hares go mad. In a mild year, they may box and batter each other as early as January, and may continue well into August. But the peak of activity does come in March and April. This pair, at least, seem to have made the right match. But there's no privacy in hare society. Just at the critical moment, another jack barges his way in and causes utter confusion. Hares are polygamous, and a jack will try to fertilize as many Jills as possible. His constant nagging may take a lot of his time and land him in a lot of trouble, but the payoff is that his attentions bring the female into season, and then she'll bear his young. And to him, that's all that matters. If the jack and Jill stay together at all, it's only for a day or two at most. Immediately after mating, the male resumes his roaming existence, leaving the female to rear the family, though she may not be completely free of him. Hares produce their offspring, called leverets, from February through to September. This Jill is heavy with young and will soon give birth. She makes herself as inconspicuous as possible, trying to avoid the Mad March jacks and predators, like the hen harrier. Many people maintain that a hare gives birth to one leveret at a time, in different forms, some distance apart. These pictures prove that the young are together at birth. Her leverets have just been born and lie helpless at her feet. They're only a minute old. A jack hare has spotted her. To a jack, a Jill is a Jill, and as such, an object of courtship at all times, however delicate the circumstances. Leverets mean little to him. While the Jill is away, giving the jack a thorough boxing, a grey partridge wanders past. It knows that something's up, but it can't quite figure what. Like most mammals born in the open, leverets are fully furred, have their eyes open, and will soon be mobile. This is in complete contrast to rabbits, which are born naked, blind, and helpless in the protection of a rabbit warren. Young hares have no such security. solitary life starts early. Within a day or two, the mother separates her leverets and hides them in what are called milking forms, where she'll come to suckle them for a few minutes each day just after sunset. Otherwise, they're on their own. It was this dispersal of the young that made people think they were born separately. Being scattered and lying still is their best hope of avoiding predators. Once they're a week or two old, they move about a bit. This is when many get taken by foxes and stoats and by birds of prey like buzzards. Rabbits are said to kill leverets too by biting them in the back of the head. This may be just another old wives' tale, but there could be some truth in it. Buck rabbits often kill their own young and might do the same to young leverets if they came across them. The Jill hare distributes her young several hundred meters apart to reduce the chances of them all being discovered. Even so, 50% of leverets die before they're a month old. It's a cruel start to life, but hares have several litters each year to compensate for this. Litter size increases through the season, from 1 in February to a maximum of 5 in August. Young hares in the same neighborhood often group together. If they reach 6 weeks old, they have a good chance of survival unless there's heavy rain. Many are born long before the crops are high enough to give them any shelter, and they succumb to exposure and disease. This is why a series of wet springs in the 60s was thought to have caused the fall in numbers. More significant was the development of new farm machinery that moved faster and cleared the ground more completely than the old-fashioned sort. The leverets may have been able to run away from it, but when it's gone, they have a problem finding enough food. Fewer weeds and narrower field margins are good news for the farmer, but they mean starvation for young hares. After the antics of the mating season, late summer is a time of quiet. Hidden in the clover and luxuriant meadowgrass, the hares keep a low profile. The pheasants are out too, taking full advantage of the abundance of insects before the grass is cut for hay. And the rabbits are making the most of it. There's another widely held belief that hares will never feed on ground used by rabbits because they make the grass foul for them. But hares do frequently feed alongside rabbits. Both are far too busy stocking up for the winter ahead to take much notice of each other. In winter, rabbits have their burrows for warmth and shelter. When the weather really sets in, they can hole up for a few days. Hares don't go in for underground protection, although they can dig perfectly well. With their backs to the gales, they somehow manage to survive the winter out in the open. Hares even manage to survive in the barren mountain country of Scotland, but it's the blue hare, not the brown, that lives here. It is by far the hardiest of the three races. In autumn, it molts its bluish-grey summer coat for a white winter one. It's smaller than the brown hare and has shorter ears. Like all hares, it eats its own pellets so that the food passes through its digestive system twice. This enables them to extract every last ounce of nourishment from their poor diet. The blue hare shares its mountain domain with the red grouse and with the ptarmigan, which also turns white in winter. It's difficult to imagine how either ptarmigan or hares are able to survive in winter. In fact, the Romans thought they ate snow to keep alive, and that's why they turn white. Today we know that it's the change in day length and temperature that triggers the change in color. In the snow, The white coat provides protective camouflage against eagles, but it can be a death warrant if there's an unexpected thaw. Crouching under these conditions won't do any good at all, though a predator might just mistake it for an isolated patch of snow. When disturbed, a mountain hare always takes off uphill. With its hind legs much longer than the forelegs, this is the natural direction for it to run. Neither a fox nor a dog can outpace it in a straight uphill run like this. Only an eagle could be in with a chance. Every few meters, the hare puts on a booster sprint to keep it moving at speed. Winter lasts 6 months for the mountain hare. It won't breed until conditions improve in March or April. Down south in England, the brown hare starts its courtship as early as the new year. The snow doesn't deter it at all. The hares are hopping mad already. In this extraordinary free-for-all, the right to mate is in hot and violent dispute. Mad and wild as the brown hare is, the most hare-brained hare of all must be the Irish hare. This archive film was shot at Aldergrove Airport in Northern Ireland in the 1960s. The amazing thing is that all these hares actually seem to enjoy living at the airport. What possible attraction can this ear-shattering and dangerous environment hold for such a sensitive animal? We'll never know for sure, of course. But perhaps living here enables the hare to satisfy its enormous capacity for recklessness. When the planes land and take off, the hares career around the airport as if they're trying to race them. Perhaps the aircraft provide a good excuse for the hares to go mad all year round, not just in spring. The Irish hare suffered the same decline as the brown hare of mainland Britain, probably for the same reasons. To try to improve the population, some landowners trapped hares in areas where they were abundant to transfer them to places where they'd become scarce. But in the words of the old cookery book, first catch your hare. As the beaters work the surrounding countryside, the hares come leaping in towards the net. Hares are very powerful runners. They can be very artful at dodging too. The keepers gently extricate the hares from the net. Gripping the hare by its loose belly fur doesn't harm it. And once they're in the specially designed boxes, they seem to accept their brief captivity. Transit to the release sites takes a few hours at most, and all the hares survive the journey. Translocating hares usually produced only a temporary improvement, and it's now going out of fashion. After all, if hare numbers fall in a particular place, it's for a reason. Disease or poor habitat will take their toll of the newcomers, as they did of the previous population. Current research is centered on crop varieties and the impact of predators such as foxes. At least conservationists, farmers and sportsmen all wish to ensure the future of this mad, unpredictable and beautiful animal. Long may she leap.